Hey everybody, this is Bill Manning with Studio C41. As you probably heard, CineStill Film has released the CS6 Creative Slide E6 Development Kit. We were a lucky beta tester and we got to try it out, so let's dive into it. All right, guys, so traditionally E6 film is just a standard developer. There was only one way to make this film. Well, CineStill Film has released not one, not two, but three different kinds of developer for this new E6, especially designed for Ektachrome E100. So let's dive into each one of these. We have your standard daylight E6 developer. You have a high dynamic range D9, which stands for 9 stops, and as well as the 9 minutes for development time. And then you also have the tungsten T6, which is T for tungsten and 6 for 6 stops and 6 minutes for developing, and a slide reversal. So this is a really cool development set. I was a beta tester. With the amount of time that I had, I was able to test out the DynamicChrome, and I was absolutely blown away. So let's dive into seeing some of the images here, and let's talk about it. I decided I wanted to develop my rolls of film with the Creative Slide DynamicChrome D9. I wanted to walk around my town during the late afternoon to really test the capabilities of the D9's dynamic range. The directions to mixing the chemistry is straightforward. I used distilled water to mix my chemistry. I used the TCS 1000 to get the chemistry up to CineStill's recommended 104 degrees temperatures for the D9 and T6 powders. This high temperature allows the powders to quickly absorb and be put straight to use. The liquid-based mixtures can be mixed at room temperature. However, if you want to get developing right away, you would want to heat up your water to a temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit. As soon as you mix the room temperature liquid chemistry into your water, that overall temperature will decrease and average close to 104 degrees Fahrenheit for immediate developing. The development is done in 3 steps. The first and most time and temperature critical step is the first developer. This developer penetrates the multiple layers of emulsion, creating the negative. The D9 is developed at 104 degrees Fahrenheit for 9 minutes with an agitation every 15 seconds. If you do not have a way to maintain the temperature for your development, CineStill Film recommends starting with a temperature of 106 degrees Fahrenheit. By the time development ends, your ending temperature will be around 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but the overall temperature will be 104 degrees Fahrenheit. After 9 minutes, the first developers return to the bottle. Then, after the 1 minute rinse, the second developer is added. The second developer activates the dye layers, which adds colors to the image, and reverses the image from a negative to a positive. This process is done between 95 and 104 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 minutes, still agitating every 15 seconds. The time and temperature are not as critical as long as the development stays within this range. Once the 6 minutes are up, the second developer is returned to the bottle and a second rinse is required to clean the remaining developer off the film. Then the bleach fix, or Blix, is added. The Blix removes all silver and hardens the emulsion for archival longevity. Just like the second developer, this fixer is added to the tank for 6 minutes between 95 degrees and 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the Blix is returned to the bottle, I go through several rinses. However, the final rinse, I add distilled water to minimize any spotting once the film has dried. There you go. All right, guys, so what we're going to be going through here is a few of the images that I shot. I shot a combination of medium format, some 35 millimeter, and also in large format. Something as a bonus and a surprise out of all this, I accidentally cross-processed Portra 400 on this, and the results were pretty amazing. So we'll dive into those here in just a minute. So one of the first images that I'm looking at here, I really wanted to test out the dynamic range of this. The DynamicChrome says that you can get up to 9 stops of dynamic range. Now, traditionally with E6 film, you would really get somewhere between, some would say, 3 stops of dynamic range to 6 stops of dynamic range. So to hear that you would get something that's relatively close to color negative, I thought that was going to be pretty crazy. So I really wanted to focus on trying to gain as much dynamic range or really contrasty scenes to really kind of test out and flex this E100. E100 is a new film. It has been completely re-engineered and arguably better than all the traditional E6 film that's out there. So this first image here, it was really tough getting around to photograph. The original intent out of this was to do some studio shooting, but unfortunately, I was not able to do that. I walked around town and I had my Hasselblad and I started photographing. And so this was like right at the tail end of golden hour. One of the things about, again, mentioning with this E6 is that I really wanted to get as much shadow detail without trying to blow out the highlights. So you can really get into the details of these clouds, right? This is way up in your highlights. But something that was pretty interesting in seeing this is that if you kind of go down a little bit further, you can see the boards that are under this pavilion. This is really deep in your shadows, but you're still able to get some detail. So in this particular image, I was really impressed that I was able to do this. In scanning this, I actually had to bracket the shot on my SLR because whenever I was trying to meter for somewhere, anywhere in this image, either my shadows were completely shot to black or the clouds were completely blown out. So I had to take 3 different exposures and bracket them and put them together in the Lightroom, and then ended up having to create essentially an HDR image just to get all the detail out of this particular image. So pretty amazing that a digital SLR scan was not even able to keep up with the amount of dynamic range that you can get out of this image. All right, so in this image, this is a cute little picture of my cat. This is Inky. She is just kind of sunbathing out in the backyard, and we were in a enclosed area. We had this really nice golden light that was shining in, and we were primarily in shadow. And so I said, let me go ahead and test the shot because she's really dark, and I'm expecting the background to be completely blown out. When this film developed, I was completely amazed that it was definitely blown out. I mean, we can see that it is very bright in that area, but I would say that in traditional slide film that I shot, this would have been clear. This would not have any detail. The fact that you can see that there's color there still, and still be able to see Inky in the light here or in the shadows, I was really impressed by this. So I'm really happy. You can see there's a lot of sharpness, a lot of detail in the shadows, but you can still see the grass that's in the background in the late afternoon sunlight. So really cool picture. I was really happy with the result in this one. When I went walking through my town and ball ground, something that I was noticing was this really white facade of this face of this building, and it was all white brick. And I said, you know what? This is the perfect situation to really test this out. We had the really intense afternoon light, late afternoon, and it was just so bright to look at this wall. So I really wanted to test this shot, and I said, okay, you guys heard the saying, meter for your highlights and let the shadows fall where they may. Well, in this particular case, this is probably one of the best examples here of that scenario. We maintained all the detail in the brick here. I metered off the truck, and you can really see that the shadows, it got really dark. You can see there's almost no detail in the back, but you can still see detail up under the van here. And I was really impressed that I was able to maintain all that detail in that white brick. Same thing a little bit further down from that. We had that really hard light, and you can see that there was a lot of fall off in this image in the shadows, but which was pretty amazing is you could actually go in and you can zoom in on this image and you can see that there is a Coca-Cola machine in the lower left-hand corner. So I was really impressed that you can still pull up details in that really dark area of this image. All right, so we're getting into the large format images here, and something I really wanted to test. For those that know how Ektachrome works in the shadows, it is a very blue image. Uh, the shadows, it just turns blue, and sometimes I never really liked how blue or how cold that slide film came out. Part of the reason why slide film was so cold is that it was projected through a tungsten light bulb. So there was some ways of being kind of canceled out as a result of being projected. So scanners really have a hard time kind of giving that correct lighting situation. So one of the features within the DynamicChrome was that the shadows are warmed up. And so if you listen in our interview with the brothers Wright, you'll actually learn that they did something that's called color timing, or what you would probably know in digital, it is called color grading. So they were able to manipulate this chemistry in order to be able to bring those blue shadows to a warmer temperature. So this was an excellent example of that situation where this really nice family here that allowed me to take their portrait in front of their house. And this is part of the Front Steps project with some friends and family. So this was an example of where it was in the late afternoon. That house was putting them in shadows, and I went ahead and metered it right off as 100 speed. So in this image, I was really impressed as far as the skin tones. Honestly, once this image was developed, I didn't have to do anything to it. I just scanned it in, and I didn't make any adjustments. I mean, this is pretty much straight out of camera. I was completely blown away. And this is a really high detailed image. I think the final scan that I got out of this was close to 100 megapixels. So this was a very, very good example of what this E100 looks like in a shadow environment, and how the skin tones do get brought up and warmed up. All right, guys, so let's go into talking about my screw up. Right off the bat, when I started this project, I thought I had Velvia 100 loaded in my film holders. Well, it turned out it was Portra 400. So when I pulled this film out of the tank for the first time, I was pleasantly surprised that I came out with a very, very cool looking slide. Traditionally, with E-6 development, where you cross process color negative in it, you get a very heavy orange cast on your images. And I was completely blown away that this was not that case with this DynamicChrome. If anything, I would say this presented an image that is very similar to almost like Lomochrome purple. Looking at this, we got this really cool, hard purple, really hard magenta look, but for some crazy reason, yellows are maintained in this. I was completely blown away by the amount of detail that this image presented. It's a super sharp image. As you would know, I had to overexpose this because I metered it for 100. This is a 400 speed film, so this is certainly very much overexposed by 2 stops. So we have this very strong purple cast. It turned all the greenery, this bokeh in the back was greenery. So all that shifted straight to purple, to a magenta color. In another image, you can see here that I was also getting that strong purple cast, but for some crazy reason, all the yellows were maintained in this. So I think for cross processing, this is going to be a really cool option to come up with a slide based film that looks almost like Lomochrome purple almost, but you're doing it in development. So I think it's going to be really cool to test more of this out in the Portra 400. All right, guys, and now we are into the 35 millimeter. The surface area on 35 millimeter is much smaller in comparison, obviously, to the medium format and the large format. So the images will come out a little bit more grainy in comparison to that because we are working with a much smaller surface area. So in these images, I went on a walk in our neighborhood right during golden hour with really strong contrasted lights. So I was really pleasantly surprised in this particular image here that we have a very high dynamic range where we do have some bright whites, we have some very dark shadows. You can see there's a lot of detail still retained within the shed that's sitting here in the very back. You can see that there's detail where that wood is getting weathered away, and still can see a lot of detail in the greenery in the leaves here in the forefront in the very direct yellow light here. So we can see that this image did get warmed up considerably with that DynamicChrome image. Another one that I kind of liked out of all this was this image of my other cat, Thor. And he is kind of just hanging out in the sunlight in the early morning. And I really wanted to capture this image of him. I feel like this was a really good representation of what DynamicChrome could do because you can see that a little bit of detail was lost in his fur under his chin here. But, you know, if I really wanted to try, I could probably bracket this shot and actually get some more detail out of it. But you can still see that there's a good bit of detail behind him, and you see that he was kind of just hanging out on his little cat bed in front of the dresser. So very sharp image. I was really happy with him actually just staying still for a few minutes to allow me to take a couple shots of him. And I was really happy with the warmness of this image. I think that this was a very great example of how the DynamicChrome played with this type of light. All right, guys, well, that wraps it up for this review. A very big thank you to CineStill Film for allowing us to be a beta tester. Please subscribe, click down below to get the latest alerts on new reviews, film reviews, and camera reviews. Also, if you want to get more information on this E6 kit, there's going to be a full write-up on studioc41.net where you can listen to an interview with the brothers Wright where we get really into the weeds on this new developer. Also, in that write-up, you'll also find images in high resolution, so you really can start digging into those images. All right, guys, well, until the next video review, shoot some film. Dang it.